Well, good morning and welcome. We're so glad to have you, whether you're in the building with us or watching online. Thank you so much for joining us on Vision Weekend. I'm Lisa, and I am the Grow Deep pastor.
And my name is Kelsey, and I'm the Associate Teaching and Student Pastor, and we're super excited to start this pre-show off with you. And really, we just want to get to know you. So wherever you're watching, we have a question we'd love for you to answer in the chat. The question is, if you could grow anything on a tree, what would you grow? Like money, cars, tacos, really fancy shoes, anything. The sky's the limit. There are no parameters. What would you grow?
Well, mine's kind of a boring answer for many of you, but for me it would be amazing. I would grow books. That being said, we have Amazon deliveries happening on the daily at our house right now. And I just know for our budget and my marriage, if I could just grow those in the backyard, that would be amazing. Yeah.
I love that. I think Amazon is the tree that gives you whatever you want. But
For a small fee.
for a small fee, I would like free. That's a good point. I was going to say money. The problem is if you give me money, I spend it on bills. So I have to go with, I would like an Expedia gift card tree.
That's good. That's good. Where would you go with your Expedia gift cards?
Yes.
There we go.
Anyone that will take us right now, I will go there. Pretty excited. I already have an answer too.
Oh, wow.
Rylan says money, just so that I can say money does grow on trees.
There we go. He could prove my dad wrong.
There you go.
All these years.
Kennedy said puppies.
Oh,
I didn't think of that one.
I didn't.
Brilliant.
That's amazing.
I would love a puppy tree.
Yes.
That'd be amazing.
Yes. So we want to hear from you wherever you're watching from. There's a chat feature that you can engage with us. We would love to hear what you would grow on trees if you could. If you don't see a chat feature, that just means that you need to download our app. And there's a super easy way you can do that. You can just click that QR code that's going to show up, and then you can download the app. It's not only going to give you access to our chat feature in there, but it's also going to give you all the insider information so that you are up to speed on all of the things that are happening and are going to happen at Eastern Hills. And this week especially, you're going to want to have the app because we've got some special stuff in there just for you.
I have a lot of answers already again.
Amazing.
Dana says probably oatmeal cream pies.
Oh,
That's a dangerous tree right
that's
there.
an amazing answer right there. Phil says that he would grow thyme. I think that's a good one too.
That's smart. Greer says rare rocks. That's impressive.
I don't think that's what he's growing on trees. I just think that's a general statement of truth.
Rare rocks.
Oh, rare rocks.
Rare rocks.
I thought you said grayer
Rare.
rocks.
That would be funny.
That's what I thought you said.
Oh, and homework answers from Megan. I think
Okay.
that might be, spaceships. The answers are endless in this service. This
It
is
is.
fun. Before we dive into way crazy answers, I want to let you know this is Vision Weekend. We celebrate Vision Weekend once a year to kind of say, what is it that God wants us to focus on? What is it that God is putting on our hearts to say, this is where we're kind of planting for the year. A year ago, we introduced JMLB, which means Jesus makes life better, which doesn't mean he makes our lives easier. Of all years that we could have said JMLB, what a crazy phrase to kind of get us through. But it's true. Jesus makes life better even in tough situations. And the amount of life change and stories that we've heard this year is incredible. So thank you for joining us for this last year of Vision. What does this year bring for us?
Yeah, so I just want to clarify a few things. When you say last year, you don't mean last calendar year. We didn't miss the end of 2020. It's not that crazy yet. It's still August, but we run kind of on the school year calendar, and so we're starting a new ministry year. And for this next year, what we're going to be talking about is what does it look like to cultivate growth in our lives. And so when you think about the soil outside in the garden, you have to do a lot of work to that soil, and our hearts work the same way. So to prepare the soil for the seed for growth, we've got to do some work in our lives as well. Phil's going to unpack that in the message today and throughout the year. So we can't wait to hear more about that. You got some good stuff?
Yes, Eric wants to grow apples. Eric,
I
you
can
can
make
do
that
that
happen for
now.
you. Yeah.
It's real.
It's good.
Apple trees are great. You should grow one. Can they grow in Colorado? I don't know.
Yeah, I think so.
Do you got any good ones for us?
I've got chips and salsa from Liz. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah, so she had said ice cream earlier, and then she got worried about the refrigeration issues, and so she has amended her answer there. I've got pizza from Duxton, and then someone said friends. So they would grow friends on their trees.
Eric just clarified. Eric, thank you. It wasn't apples. It's Apple products.
Oh, that's
Brilliant.
very different.
That is very different.
Those don't grow on trees.
No, I wish they would. I wish they would. Hey, if it's your first time with us, you're probably watching and going, they're weird. And you're probably right. We like to have a lot of fun here. We like to take ourselves not super seriously, so we can just have casual conversations. But what we do take seriously is getting to know you as a person. You matter to us, you matter to God. And we'd love to get to know a little bit more about you. You can go to ehills.org/connect. And there's just a couple questions that help us help you find a next step and get to know you a little bit. I promise nothing super scary. We're just super grateful that you're joining us this morning.
Yes. And I also want to thank you so much for your generosity. So last week, we asked you to partner with us to help create school backpacks that were filled up with school supplies for kids in our community. And you guys showed up. We were able to give away over 500 backpacks to students in the community, and we had money left over that we could grant to some of our teachers to help offset the costs that they have to spend in their classroom. So as a former teacher, thank you so much. It makes a huge difference for our teachers when they have the supplies that they need to teach our kids. So super grateful for that. If you want to know how you can partner with us, you can go to ehills.org/give.
Hey, we're going to get started in just a moment, but Phil is going to start out as he's talking with a question that we need you to answer in the chat, just like you've been doing all morning. What is your best gardening advice? What is your best gardening advice? Lisa?
Yep, I got it. Don't do it.
Done.
That's what I do.
That was brilliant advice. I once killed a cactus, so I should probably take your advice on that one.
Yes.
But I will say when I killed the cactus, a fourth grader decided to inform me that I killed it by overwatering. So my advice is don't overwater.
That's good. That's good. My outside plants would say the opposite, which is why I go back to my original advice, not to do it at all.
That's totally fair.
Well, hey, we're getting ready to get started. It's been so fun hanging out with you. We're going to reset the stage. That's going to take about 90 seconds. When we come back, we're going to sing a couple songs. So however you want to engage with that, go ahead. We'll see you in just a minute.
disappointment. Sunday's empty too. But since when has impossible ever stopped you? This is the sound of the dry bones rattling. This is the praise make a dead man walk again. Open the grave, I'm coming out. I'm gonna live again. This is the sound of the dry bones rattling. Pentecostal fire, stirring something new. You're not gonna run out of miracles anytime soon. And resurrection power runs in my veins too. I believe there's another miracle here in this room. This is the sound of the dry bones rattling. This is the praise make a dead man walk again. Open the grave, I'm coming out. I'm gonna live again. This is the sound of the dry bones rattling. My God is able to save and deliver and heal and restore anything that He wants to. Just ask the man who was thrown on the bones of Elisha if there's anything that He can do. Just ask the stone that was rolled at the tomb in the garden what happens when God says to move. I feel Him doing it now. I feel Him doing it now. I feel Him doing it now. Do it now. Do it now. This is the sound of the dry bones rattling. This is the praise make a dead man walk again. Open the grave, I'm coming out. I'm gonna live again. Open the grave, I'm coming out. I'm gonna live again. Open the grave, I'm coming out. I'm gonna live again. This is the sound of the dry bones rattling.
I love you, Lord. Oh, your mercy never fails me. All my days I've been held in your hand. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. All my life you have been this your prayer? All my life you have been so good. With every breath that I am able, I'm gonna sing of the goodness of God. I'm gonna sing, I'm gonna sing, oh yes. Why? 'Cause all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I'm gonna sing of the goodness of God. Yes, I'm gonna sing of the goodness of God. I'm gonna sing, I'm gonna sing. Thank you, God. Well, welcome once again, everyone. We're so glad that you're here, whether you're in the room with us or joining us online. Why don't you go ahead and have a seat?
Well, hey, everybody. Welcome. We are so glad you're here, whether you're joining us online or in the room. Thanks for being here. It's great to see you guys. You look great. We actually celebrated last night our first time. We're trying out on Saturday nights having family ministry environments through middle school. So thanks so much to so many who served last night maybe, and you're attending now or you're watching online now to make that happen. A really fun kind of next step for us as we figure out what fall looks like. And I've wanted to say this all weekend, but it's like, if I say it every service, they're going to get annoyed. They're probably annoyed even when I do it one time. But how amazing was the band this morning? That was awesome. Yeah. And Josiah, who normally leads from the keys, we do a run through where we see the whole service before anybody does. And I'd never seen him lead away from the keys before. And all of a sudden I was like, all right, bro, let's go. It was amazing. So good, so good. So fun. Well, hey, Vision Weekend for us is a chance before life happens to you for you to be able to hopefully maybe set and calibrate what your year is going to look like and how you're going to think about and focus on what God really has for you this year. And so this year, we're focusing on what it means to cultivate life. See, it's so easy to look around most of the time and go, well, the circumstances of that person's life have allowed them to get to here. My circumstances are just different. But what 2020 has shown us is that a lot of us are in very similar circumstances, but people are responding and experiencing those circumstances very differently, not because of what's happening around them, but because of what's going on within them. And that's what we're going to talk about together today. Before we get started, though, I'm going to pray for us. And if you've never been here before, never heard me speak, I pray kneeling, because as much as things feel out of control, we have a God that we get to worship, serve, and actually interact with that is in control. So wherever you are, would you just humble yourself right now in your own heart, and let's talk to him together. God, thank you that even though our circumstances feel out of control, you are just as in control as you have ever been. Thank you for the call that you've placed on our life to lean on you in situations like this. I pray that we would. I pray that we would learn from you today, from your own words 2,000 years ago, and how we would apply those to our life, not just today, but as we enter into this year. It's in Jesus' name, amen. All right, so early on in the pre-service, they asked you a question, which is, what is your best gardening advice? I'm asking you in part because I actually want it, so feel free to keep that flowing. Megan said, cactuses, just let them chill. honestly, that feels like pretty good advice in Colorado. We'll talk about that in a minute. Rylan said, don't invite me. I think that means like to garden. All right, good to know, Rylan. Thanks for the heads up. Nita said, do it. It's so rewarding every spring, summer, fall to see the hard work you put into it. Agree to disagree. And then Peggy said, I don't garden. I can hardly make sure my houseplants survive. That's amazing. So wherever you are with gardening, here's what I know. This year, we have spent some time kind of learning and getting better at gardening with our own house. Well, let me correct that. Alyssa has spent some time figuring out how to take better care of our yard this year. It's really been essentially entirely her work. But here's what I've learned. I've learned that it's actually really difficult to do this in Colorado. And the reason for that is because we are in what's called a high plains desert. And so if you're watching this somewhere else, like that just means that it's really hot. And not only that, immediately beneath the top layer of soil, we have soil clay. And so that makes it really difficult for anything to grow. And so because of that, like it's just really hard. It doesn't matter what you put on the soil. It's actually what's going to happen inside of the soil that really makes the difference. And so that's what we're going to talk about is what we do beneath the surface. So I hope that what we learned today and what we can carry with us into this fall is this idea that there is no soul work without soil work. This isn't just true in my garden, in our yard. This is true in our heart. This is true in our life. And there may be some things you want to be different, some things you hope will be better over the course of this year. But if all you ever do is work on the outside, those changes will be short-term. They will be temporary. They will not hold up. And so we're going to step into Jesus talking to a crowd 2,000 years ago. As a matter of fact, it's kind of like a first century version of a socially distanced teaching because Jesus, the crowd is getting so big, it's thousands of people. He gets in a boat and he actually pulls back from the shore so that he can actually project and speak to all of them. That's where we start, is his message for the crowd. And actually, you may not know this, but if you have maybe attended church off and on before, or maybe somebody shared this with you, most of the time what we settle for, and what I hope maybe you'll feel the call from God to not settle for this year, is this idea of this message for the core, that there's actually more for you, or a message for the crowd, there's more for you than what is just available to the crowd. But before we dive into that, I'd love for you to answer this question wherever you're watching online, or if you're in the room, you can answer it in the app. How did or do you handle difficult subjects in school? How did you or do you handle difficult subjects in school? I think it's an important question because when we come up against obstacles, it really trains us how we're going to do that throughout the rest of life. Now, some of you, I asked that question and you're like, I don't even understand the question. I'm married to one of these people who are like, no subject was difficult for me in school. That I don't understand what you're asking. Cool, that makes the rest of us feel great. So thanks for that, way to go, you did it. And some of you, you had some subjects that you were really good in and other subjects that you weren't so good in. And so what you could do is just like they could balance out and worked out. And then some of us, it was like if we just gave up on all the subjects that were difficult, we would never graduated because all the subjects were difficult. Way to go, we made it. And if you're in the middle of that, it's worth it, you can do it. Now we're going to dive into a story that Jesus shares with this crowd. It's actually called a parable. And parables are designed as these made up stories to either conceal or reveal a point. And that's what we see Jesus do a whole bunch in his ministry. And so we dive into this text. It says this. It says, then he told them many things in parables, saying, a farmer went out to sow his seed. As he was scattering the seeds, some fell along the path and the birds came and ate it up. Some fell on rocky places where it did not have much soil. It sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow, but when the sun came up, the plants were scorched and they withered because they had no root. Other seed fell among thorns, which grew up and choked the plants. Still other seed fell on good soil, where it produced a crop, 160 or 30 times what was sown. Now, Jesus breaks down these 4 types of soil in this parable because he wants to highlight something, right? It's the same seed in every one of these scenarios. We call it the parable of the sower, so does Jesus. It's really about the 4 soils because the seed is exactly the same. It's what the condition is where the seed lands that determines whether or not it's going to grow. And so that's what we see Jesus identify here. The thing is, though, we don't get to fully understand this, and actually, even the people that Jesus was talking to would not have fully understood it. That's the point of the parable. But what Jesus gets to at the end, they definitely understood. See, they're in an agricultural economy. This is what they did. They did farming all the time. And so they were with Jesus when he talked about along the path. They were with Jesus when he talked about the thorny stuff. And then he gets to the good soil, and he says, this soil is capable of a kind of exponential growth. Now, they knew that good soil could produce growth, but the kind of growth that Jesus was talking about was not just a really good crop year. Jesus was talking about something that was supernatural, that was naturally impossible. And so at this point, everybody listening realizes like, oh, we're not talking about our farm anymore. We're not talking about gardening anymore. We're talking about something different. And when we get to that place, how we show up in that spot is so incredibly important. Because for a lot of us, what we have to take a step back and realize is if when we get to moments like that, we settle for that, we have settled for something far too short of what God has for you and for me. As a matter of fact, many of you, this has been the way you approach church or you approach times like this with other followers of Jesus. And so you listen, you hear, and actually at the end of this section, Jesus says, whoever has ears, let him hear. And Jesus is not saying some of you are incapable of hearing. He's identifying the difference between physically hearing something and actually understanding it. Because at the end of the day, actually understanding it is different. And so what does it mean for you and me to reach beyond what the crowd would understand? To be able to really hear what God means. As a matter of fact, that's why I asked you that question a few minutes ago. How did you or do you handle difficult subjects in school? And I'm not sure, I don't see any down here, so we might not have these. Oh, there we go. Brittany said, studied more. Good grades were a big deal for me. There you go. Good for you. Don said, unfortunately, by procrastinating. That's good. Have you ever heard the line, procrastinators of the world unite tomorrow? That's a good one. Jan and Melissa, my thing went away here. Jan and Melissa said, growing up, I would procrastinate and use sarcasm to mask my difficulty. It's taken me years to break those habits, still working on them sometimes. And Dana said, got help from another student usually. Now, here's what I want to say. If you are those other students and you're annoyed because it took all your time because people like us were asking you for your help and you just felt like, I don't need to do this. Why are you making me do this? Here's what I'll say from all of us. Thank you very much. It was really helpful. Appreciate you. Because here's the thing, we have to figure out what we do when we come up against this. We have to figure out what we do when we come up against what feels like an impasse, when we don't understand, and break through the surface of that. Because there is no soul work without soil work. If you really want God to work in you, you have to let him get actually beneath the core. And that's what we're gonna see next, is not just the message for the crowd, but the meaning for the core. See, Jesus would often talk to big crowds, and this one was thousands of people. He's off the shore. He's just getting to a distance where he can talk to them. But then he gets into this separate part with his closest friends, and he's explaining the purpose of parables. And it's so good that he did that, right? Because you and I get an invitation to the core when he does that. As a matter of fact, you may not know this about parables, but the thing about parables is they were actually not just getting used by Jesus during his ministry. When we look at the Hebrew scriptures, what we call the Old Testament, we see parables get used as a form of judgment to hold back pieces of information that God knew people weren't ready to hear yet. So the people who were ready to hear it could hear it and understand, and the people who weren't could conceal it. And Jesus was prolonging his public ministry by using parables so that the people that were out to get him wouldn't understand his point, but then his closest friends would actually get close and go like, hey, Jesus, here's the thing. You know how like we all were listening and you were talking and we were like nodding like we understood? And Jesus is like, yep. And he's like, we had no idea what you were saying, right? So we get to jump into that conversation, which is awesome. But before we do, I'd love for you to answer this question in the chat, in the app, wherever you're watching this. What keeps you from being vulnerable? What keeps you from being vulnerable? This is so important because oftentimes what we find ourselves wanting to do is look the part even when it's not true, even it's not where we really are. And so being vulnerable is critical in moments like this. What keeps you from being vulnerable? And so they get Jesus, in a room with just them and they ask him, hey, Jesus, can you just tell us like what you actually meant by that parable we were pretending that we understood? And Jesus said this. He said, hear then the parable of the sower. When anyone hears the word of the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what has been sown in his heart. This is what was sown along the path. See, what Jesus is about to do is he's about to take this thing he shared in just a couple sentences, and he's about to break it down one soil type after another to all 4 different soil types. And so he starts with the first one, which is the seed that was sown along the path. And he said, this seed that's sown along the path is actually never gonna grow. He's describing a hard heart. He's describing a heart where the spiritual investment that takes place in our life, it never breaks the surface of our heart. We might be able to maybe look the part, but it's never going to actually make a real difference. And here's the thing, some of us in this season, it's understandable. I know why we're doing it, but what we've done is we've actually done this to ourselves. We have put up walls and barriers, and we have created distance between us and other people. We have become hard-hearted. And the lie that we communicate is, you know what, I'm only doing that in this area of my life, but that's not the way our life works. When we decide that we're not gonna let people in, we don't let anyone in. And all of a sudden, we just put up walls everywhere. The other thing that I think sometimes we do, and we do this individually, and I think we do this at a broader societal level, is when we have a hard heart where things can't penetrate and change us, what we wanna do is we wanna change God. And so we take the timeless truths of God, right? Heaven and earth will pass away, but the word of God will last forever. We go, you know what, God? I know that people have heard you say these very clear words, and they have meant one thing for thousands of years, but like actually now, today in 2020, we found a better way to interpret it. They were all wrong, and the better way that we want to interpret it conveniently coincides with the thing we wanted to do anyway. So that's awesome, right? That's what hard hearts do. We don't change. We ask God to change, but God doesn't change. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. He changes us. And I want to take just a minute and talk to somebody in here or somebody watching online where you are somebody where you're watching this, somebody shared it with you or somebody invited you to be here, and I'm so glad that you're here, but you're not a Christian. And the really good news is the same hope and the same message of Jesus is available to you that's available to me or anybody else. The hard thing though is this hard heart, it may be describing you. You've heard the gospel. The gospel is that God loved you and me so much that even though we could never get to him and we would never deserve relationship with him, he sent his son to live a perfect life, to die in our place, to come back from the grave, that if we would turn from our own way and receive what he's given to us and follow him for the rest of our life, we would experience a better life, not because it's easier, but because it's with him and eternity. That's the gospel. And the thing is, for some of you, you've just decided, I hear it, but I'm never gonna let it change me. I'm never gonna let it actually penetrate the soil of my heart. And my caution to you is, you are not making that decision on your own. It's the enemy of your soul and the enemy of my soul that would love nothing more for you than to just keep hearing it and keep living a life that you know isn't working. That's the hard heart. That's the soil along the path. And then Jesus continues. He says, as for what was sown on rocky ground, this is the one who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy. Yet he has no root in himself, but endures it for a while. And when tribulation or persecution arises on account of the word, immediately he falls away. So Jesus has talked to us first about the hard heart, and here he's going to talk to us about the superficial heart. See, the superficial heart is really, really a problem, right? Because rocky ground, it could look like the seed has made a difference. It describes that it starts to grow up, but there's no personal depth. And when challenges come, when obstacles come, all of a sudden, what's real shows up. And because there's no depth, because that clay soil in your and my heart will not allow real roots to grow deep, all of a sudden the plant withers and dies. And we lie to ourselves. We lie to ourselves all the time because what we say is, hey, I don't think this is necessarily a season for me to grow. And so you've had some superficial growth, but then you decide to like take some time off. And we lie to ourselves and convince ourselves that the growth we had before will just sit on a shelf, but that's not the way spiritual growth works. As a matter of fact, some of you, this isn't days ago, it's decades ago. And you still come to church or you still check out spiritual content, and that's great. And you could tell me about when you made a decision to follow Jesus. You could tell me about when you got baptized. You could tell me some significant moments in your spiritual life in the very first days of it. But somewhere along the way, God no longer had access to your life. And maybe it's because things got difficult. Maybe it's because the challenge is mounted. But you're the kind of person, like, you get all the gear for a specific hobby, but you never do that hobby. You're the kind of person that every relationship you have has some ceiling where you always find an excuse or always find a reason why you can't continue on in that relationship and you have to find another one. The way that it shows up in your relationship with God is that at some point you just decide that it's too hard, that you're gonna stop. Maybe just for a while, maybe that's the way you rationalize it, but you sacrifice all the growth that you had up to this point. That's how the superficial heart works. It's always easier to blame the seed. It's always easier to blame somebody else. Then Jesus tells us about the third one. He says, as for what was sown among the thorns, this is the one who hears the word, but the cares of the world and the deceitfulness of riches choke the word, and it proves unfruitful. So we've talked about hard-heartedness, superficial heartedness. This one is the distracted heart. And I'm just gonna be honest with you for a minute. This is the one God's working on me with right now. So I got a little bit more fire for this one. So if this is you, maybe God's gonna speak to you about it the same way he's been speaking to me about it. This is that the pressures and the treasures of this world push out and choke your faith. Here's the thing, right? It's easy for us to rationalize. It's easy for us to make excuses about all the things that are happening in our life. None of us, when we think about the distracted heart, none of us are like doing horrible, evil things. That's not what's at stake here. What it really is you're doing good things that you've turned into ultimate. And you've taken some things that were just fine, but you've made them the center of your life, your job, that relationship, that habit, that hobby, that initiative, that priority. You've taken good things and made them ultimate, and then the ultimate thing, your relationship with God, doesn't have the right space, doesn't have the right priority in your life. And here's the thing about weeds. Weeds grow over time. And so there's this problem that we all have where it's like the frog in the frying pan. It just goes up 1 degree at a time. It doesn't notice that it's too hot until it's too late. And you and me in our lives, all these different priorities growing up over time. Maybe you, like me, at the beginning of COVID, everything went away for a minute and you were like, oh, this is amazing. I'm gonna be able to really fix my priorities. And then somewhere along the way, you were like, how did that happen? Everything's back. How did it happen? I'm actually busier somehow right now than I was before. You know, that's just the way that weeds work. Before you know it, they're out of control. Last year, we had in our backyard a couple sections of weeds that got so bad, we literally had to have a guy come out with like a machete and a truck and just like move all the weeds out of our backyard. It was insane. But I'm happy to report that this year, we, and by we, I mean Alyssa, is doing way better with our yard. It's way, way better. But there is still a few different spots that we're working on, trying to deal with the wreckage that the bunnies left behind. And here's a picture of our backyard, like our lawn area. And just so you can kind of see it, if you look really close, you're like, oh, cool, there's grass there. And then you're like, what's that tall grass? Those are weeds. That's weeds in our backyard. You're like, well, this is a little embarrassing. For sure, yeah, absolutely, I get it. But here's the reason that we keep the weeds, here's the reason I keep the weeds there, because they're green. And if I were to take them out, then all of a sudden I have like even more bare spots in our backyard that I have to solve for. And you're like, yeah, but like there's so many of them back there. Like they're so tall, what do you do? Well, here's what I do, and before you laugh, I'm gonna challenge you that maybe you do it too. I just mow the weeds. There's a lot of judgment in this room right now. I just mow the weeds. Because here's the thing, like for a few days after you mow the weeds, your backyard looks amazing. It looks so good. Because here's the thing about weeds, there are some weeds that can confuse us and convince us that they're actually really growth, but they're not. And the only way to get rid of weeds is to actually pull them out, to get them out by the roots. And then you have to deal with the soil that's underneath to get really the right stuff to grow in its place. But for you and me, if we have a distracted heart and we have even good priorities that have become ultimate, we can't just mow down those priorities for a few days and hope they don't come back. I'll promise you, my experience is that's not the way it works. But we have convinced ourselves of something. We have convinced ourselves that the weeds, that the distractions, that the misaligned priorities of our life only affect us. But that's not the way weeds work. We have neighbors just on the other side of those weeds, and these neighbors have an amazing backyard. Like it could be in a magazine, it's awesome. And I am sure that these neighbors have talked about us, not in a good way. Like I'm sure of it. And they have probably talked about the fact like, hey, they better take care of those weeds because eventually like they're gonna spread to our yard because weeds spread. And when you allow your heart to be distracted, when you allow your priorities to be confused, guess what? The propensity of the people that are closest to you for that same thing to happen to them grows as you don't deal with those things in your life. And so what does it look like for you to deal with the distractions in your life, to be able to get at the weeds and not just mow them down, to realize that this is more and bigger than just what you are thinking about? So those are the three types. Then Jesus talks about this final one. He says, as for what was sown on good soil, this is the one who hears the word and understands it. He indeed bears fruit and yields, in one case 100-fold, in another 60, and in another 30. Here Jesus has talked to us about all three of these types, hard and then superficial and then distracted. And now he talks about the right kind of soil, which is the dedicated heart. The good soil is the dedicated heart. It's the heart that hears and understands and lets God bear fruit in them. They're not just spectating, they are participating in the work of God in their life and in their world. They give God access to their inner life. That those areas of secret sin that have become distractions or been the thing that's allowed your heart to stay superficial, you let God break through that. And love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, self-control, those things begin to flow naturally out of us. And it's not just this idea that if you and I will do this, somehow magically everything will be all better. That's not what he's talking about. What he's saying is that it's not just natural growth. It's not just 1 + 1 = 2 in your spiritual life if you will do this, if you will examine your soil. It's exponential supernatural growth. And so if you want the kind of growth that you've only dreamed about in your spiritual life, you want the kind of growth that isn't just what God did sometime long ago or within the first few weeks of you deciding to follow Jesus, if you want the best and greatest year of growth you've ever experienced, Eastern Hills, if you want to cultivate life this year, that means that you and I let God work on the soil of our life. But part of that is being vulnerable. And I asked you a few minutes ago, what keeps you from being vulnerable? And some of you answered online. Natalie said past hurts and criticisms. I think that's an obstacle for all of us that we face in this question. Vicky said fear of embarrassment or shame. Absolutely. Liz said, I have to know you pretty well to let my walls down if I'm gonna be vulnerable with you. And Preston said, being judged. Look, we all have some of these obstacles, and if we're not careful, we take those things and we use them as reasons to not be honest with anybody. But do you know what a synonym for vulnerable is? Honest. If you want to be honest in your relationships with people, it means you're vulnerable. If you want to be honest in your relationship with God, you have to be vulnerable. And we convince ourselves that, no, it's just this person. But we have downshifted our level of honesty in relationships way too often because we've just not let ourselves be honest about what's going on underneath the surface. And if you want this work to be meaningful, if you want this work to be durable, then there is no soul work without soil work. You got to let God in to what's going on underneath the hood. And I hope you hear that. I hope you understand that Vision Weekend of 2020 is not just about some new stuff that we're doing. It's about the stuff that God wants to do inside of you. Many of you know this about me. I'm a pretty picky eater, and it's always interesting when I travel, especially overseas with people that know me, like if I'm on a mission trip or something, and they'll see me eat, and I eat everything. And they're very surprised. They'll be like, well, why are you eating everything here when you're so picky back at home? And the thing is, I know that if I don't eat, there's no other food available, You can't be like, hey, is there a Chipotle around here? No, not an option. And here's what I'll say. I think that for some of us, what's happened in our faith is that we have become pretty picky. It's become very, very easy to criticize the spiritual seed and investment around us. But here's a quote I heard recently that I just think is important for us to think about. Hungry people find a way to get fed. Truly spiritually hungry people will find a way to get fed. And here's the thing, there are some of you that like you are at Eastern Hills, you are watching online right now, and the reason is because the last pastor you had didn't do it the way you wanted them to do it. Because the last Bible study class you were in, you didn't like the teacher. Because the last community group you were in, you didn't like the people that were in the group. And so it just became really easy to look for the right kind of spiritual seed. And I don't know your heart and I don't know the circumstances. But I'm just telling you, it is so much easier to blame the seed than examine the soil. It is so much easier. But hungry people will always find a way to get fed. And we place probably far too great a priority on the spiritual investment around us and too low a priority on the work that God is doing within us. And so here's the question I would love for you maybe to be asking, not just in the chat over the next few minutes, but I'd love for you to do it there. Not just over the next week, but maybe put this somewhere around you as we focus on cultivating life as a community over the next year. Put this on your mirror in your bathroom. Put this on the lock screen on your phone. Put this by your steering wheel. Put this by your computer. This is such an important question that when we face challenges, when we face obstacles, because we're gonna face more this year and more next year, life is not going to become easy all of a sudden. Ask this question. Are you blaming the seed or examining your soil? Because it's always gonna be easier to blame the seed. There will always be something that somebody didn't do the way that you wish they'd done it. But examining the soil is so important. Because here's the thing, we think as followers of Jesus that this is a one and done experience. You think, you know what? You're right, Phil, I need to deal with this. I'm not gonna just spectate today, I'm gonna participate. I'm gonna let God in. I'm gonna let him do some stuff in my life. I'm gonna make some changes this week. But here is the problem about the soil of your and my heart. It's the same problem as my backyard had. You know all those weeds that we got rid of last year? They're back. They keep growing. And the work that we have to do in our soil is not a one and done work. It's a process that we have to stay consistent with. We have to stay faithful with. We have to keep working on it. So maybe you did this years ago. Great. Time to do it again. Maybe you did it months ago. This is a daily inventory of your heart, of my heart with God. Now, one of the tools that we're gonna release, and we'll have a bunch of things we'll do all year to help us focus on this and do this as a community, but one of the tools that we're gonna release today in the Eastern Hills app, on the very top section of it, is something called the Rule of Life. And it's a resource that we've adapted for our community, not about creating more rules for your life, but creating a way in which your life can have spiritual growth take place the right way. Because here's the thing, as you start to work on your soil, I believe that God is gonna grow in you something spiritually that maybe you've never had before. You're gonna see and experience God in ways that you've never experienced before this year. And if you think about this Rule of Life resource, we'll do it a week at a time. We'll release it each weekend together. Think about it like a trellis, right? And so as you grow a plant, that's how it knows where to grow. That's how it knows how to grow healthy, is it can cling to that. That's what this can be for you and me. I hope you'll see it that way over the next few weeks together. And then maybe some of you today are thinking about quitting on something really important in your life, thinking about quitting on your relationship with God, thinking about quitting your marriage. Some of you are thinking about quitting some really important stuff in your life. And I'm just encouraging you, don't do that. Because what you may convince yourself that thing, that person, that thing over here or over there is the real problem. And if you just change that, everything will be better. It won't be. Because if you don't deal with the condition underneath the surface, if you don't deal with what's really going on in your heart, whether you have a hard heart or you have a superficial heart or you have a distracted heart, if you can't get to a dedicated heart, none of the circumstantial changes you can make in your life will really matter. But if you let God deal with your heart, if you let him deal with the soil inside of you, the change that he can do is supernatural. In just a second, we're gonna sing a song together. And this song talks about the fact that God is in the business of turning graves into gardens. That he can actually break through the surface of your hard-heartedness. And rather than playing games where you hope he'll change, he can start changing you. He can let you get to that place where normally you would stop with superficial growth and break through the layers of that pain and those problems and grow real roots through the strongholds, through the sin, through the pain, through the hurt. He can get rid of all the root systems of those distractions and create space so that your heart can be dedicated to him this year like never before. Can I pray for you? God, this is not just a message for some of us. This is a message for all of us. Maybe there's somebody in this room, God, that right now they need to decide to turn to you for the very first time, to set aside what they can do and to believe and receive what you've done for them. I pray that they would right now. For some people in this room, God, it's about examining, and instead of blaming others and blaming you, it's about examining themselves. We're all facing things we've never faced before, God. Would you give us the courage? Would you give us the confidence to trust you, to let you in? Who are we fooling, God? As we sing these words, I pray we wouldn't just participate, but God, we would let you invade our hearts right now. That you would change and shape us, and that this would be the beginning of the best year of spiritual growth we have ever had, individually and as a community. We love you. It's in Jesus' name. Amen. If you're all with us online or here in the room, would you stand and sing with us?
I searched the world, but it couldn't fill me. The man's empty praise, the treasures that fail. There's no facing wall you can't break through, no mountain you can move. All things are possible. There's no broken body you can't raise, no soul that you can't save. All things are possible. On the darkest night, and you can light it up. Oh, you can light it up. Oh, God of revival, let hope arise, and death is overcome. Yes, you've already won. Oh, God of revival, you rose in victory, and all you see, forever on the throne. Yes. So why should my heart fail when you've defeated? Oh, I will trust in you alone. 'Cause there's no prison wall you can't break through, no mountain you can't move. All things are possible. Oh, there's no broken body you can't raise, no soul that you can't save. All things are possible. On the darkest night, oh, you can light it up. Yes, you can light it up. Oh, God of revival, let hope arise, and death is overcome. Oh, you've already won. Oh, God of revival, oh, God of revival. Oh, yes, you're in this place, God. Come awaken your people. Come awaken the city. Oh, God of revival, pour it out, pour it out. Every stronghold will crumble, and I hear the chains hit the ground. Oh, God of revival, pour it out, pour it out. Come awaken your people. Come awaken the city. Oh, God of revival, pour it out, pour it out. Every stronghold will crumble, and I hear the chains hit the ground. Oh, God of revival, pour it out, pour it out. Oh, the darkest night, oh, you can light it up. Yes, you can light it up. Oh, God of revival, let hope arise, and death is overcome. Oh, you've already won. Oh, God of revival, and come awaken your people. Come awaken the city. Oh, God of revival, pour it out, yes, God. Every stronghold will crumble, and I hear the chains hit the ground. Oh, God of revival, pour it out, Come awaken your people. Come awaken the city. Oh, God of revival, pour it out, pour it out. Every stronghold ground. Oh God of revival, pour it out, pour it out. God, that is our prayer today, that you would awaken our hearts, that you would awaken the people around us to know you, to run after you, and to sit in your presence. God, remind us that there's no battle that you haven't already won. You reign victorious over our lives. We need you right here and right now. We need a revival. God, mold us, change us, make us new, produce new growth within us. We trust you, God. Amen. You can go ahead and take a seat.
You know, it can be really tempting to tune in for the weekend and then tune out without taking the time to process what we just learned. But I would encourage you to take some time, not just over the next day or so, but over the next year, to continually ask yourself, what is the condition of the soil in your heart? And also, what's next for you? For some of you, what's next is actually cultivating time in your marriage. Because let's face it, after you've said I do, it doesn't take long for real life to settle in. Choices become patterns, patterns become habits, and if we're not careful, till death do us part can feel like a death sentence. But here's the good news. It doesn't have to be that way. So whether your marriage simply needs to be reignited or whether you need a resurrection, Reengage is for you, where you will learn how to reconnect with your spouse and cultivate a better marriage. So for more details on Reengage, you can go to ehills.org/reengage. And if you're anything like me, my marriage will take a back seat when life gets crazy. But it's worth the investment because when my marriage is healthy, I'm better and my family is better. And so I thank you for your generosity and partnering with us to make environments like Reengage available to our community. And if you want more information about partnering with us, go to ehills.org/give. In just a moment, Connection Point is going to roll with 4 easy next steps for you to get better connected. And if you are new here, we would love to have you join us. So thank you once again for joining us here. We can't wait to see you back next week, whether it's online or on our campus at Eastern Hills. Have a great week.
Welcome to Connection Point. My name's Dustin and I'm the Connections Pastor here. And if you're looking to get involved today, you came to the right place.
And my name's Liz, and I'm the community pastor here. And over the next few minutes, we're going to give you some information about some ways that you can take some easy next steps here at Eastern Hills. These next steps are really designed for you to grow deeper in your walk with Jesus and also to connect here at the church. So first, we would love to share a little bit more about who we are with you.
Here at Eastern Hills, we want to help everyone experience that Jesus makes life better. And honestly, when we follow him, he makes us better at life. You might be coming from a background where you've been hurt by church in the past, and you might even be thinking, if that's what better life looks like, I'm not sure that's what I want. And you might even also think, hey, if I follow Jesus, is he really gonna solve all my problems? I don't think that's how it works. And honestly, you're right. Jesus is not gonna necessarily make our life easy, but we really believe that when we follow him and commit our full life to God, he makes our life better and makes us better at life.
So today we want to offer you 4 steps that you can take to start growing in a relationship with Jesus here at Eastern Hills. Those 4 steps are serving as a volunteer, joining a group, giving generously, and then also steps that you can take as a family. You can find links to all of these steps at ehills.org/next. So Dustin, do you want to share a little bit more about what it looks like to serve at Eastern Hills?
Yeah, so serving at Eastern Hills normally looks a little different. We have opportunities all over the building and in different places throughout the week and on the weekend. But because of COVID, things don't look quite the same right now. But for you, that actually makes things a lot easier because the best place for you to get involved and volunteer here at Eastern Hills is on a weekend. We would love to have you come be here in the building, greeting, welcoming, helping people find a seat, and just creating an amazing experience for people as they walk in, or helping online, hosting one of our streams on Facebook or YouTube. We think God built us to serve one another, and when we do that, He uses that service to grow us personally into the person that He designed us to be. So you get to serve other people in the community and you get to grow yourself. We'd love for you to do that, and you can find the link to that volunteer sign up at ehills.org/next.
Another way that you can take a next step here at Eastern Hills is by joining a group, and we really believe that groups are an essential way to connect with God and in community. When you join a group, you have the opportunity to surround yourself with people who will walk alongside you in your faith, people who will encourage you and challenge you to grow spiritually, people who will read the Bible with you and pray for you, people who will do life with you, whether you're in a great season or whether you're in a really hard season. We've seen some incredible relationships grow out of our groups at Eastern Hills, and we would love for you to take a next step to join a group to be a part of that too. So you can head to ehills.org/next to learn more about how to join one of our groups.
Next up is generosity, and this can be a little bit of an awkward conversation when it comes to church. You might be thinking, here we go again, another church that just wants my money so their pastor can buy a jet. Or maybe somebody in the past told you if you don't give a certain percentage of your money to God, He's not gonna bless you, He's gonna be mad at you. We believe God designed us to be generous. When we give our resources away, and honestly, when we give our whole life away, we can find more and more contentment and joy the less and less we have. And so we want to give you an opportunity today to be generous and start to experience some of that better life. If you go to ehills.org/next and make a $20 donation, your full gift will go to Marketplace, which is a weekly food pantry that provides groceries to families who need it all over our community. Your $20 actually can go even further than if you went to the store and bought it yourself. Because of our partnership with Food Bank of the Rockies, we can stretch that money and provide enough food for a family of 4 for an entire week.
Which I can't even feed my family of 4 for an entire week. So that is an incredible way to help.
Yeah, it's so amazing to get to be a part of, and we want to steward our resources and your resources well. And so if you want to give and start being a part of how we serve our community here, we would love for you to do that. You can go to ehills.org/next and find the link to do that today.
And the last next step that you can take is actually for you as a family. At Eastern Hills, we believe the whole family matters and was built to pursue God together. We go about partnering with you and your family by creating amazing age-appropriate spaces for each kid to grow in their faith, and also by coming alongside you as a parent or a guardian to help you become the hero in your child's story. So you can head to ehills.org/next to learn more about our YouTube channels that we have for kids of all ages, whether that content is live or on demand. Kids can connect anywhere at home. You can also find a way to sign up for our family newsletter at that link as well. We would love for you to take a next step with us as a family.
Thanks so much for spending part of your day with us. We hope that as you take a next step here at Eastern Hills, you can experience that Jesus makes life better and maybe even find ways that He makes you better at life. Thanks so much for watching and have a great day.